We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 52a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a Mishnah Meseches Shkalim, which says that with regards to the ashes of the Paraduma, there's no Me'ila, and that's due to a takana of the Bezdin. And the Gemara is now in the middle of asking on this from a Brisa. The Brisa brings a pasuk chatos he and learns from the word he in the pasuk that bi'afra ein mo'alin, that with the ashes of the paraduma there's no me'ila, and that seems to indicate that it's a doraisa that there's no me'ila. It's not just a takana from the bezdin. And the Gemara continues and answers as it did on the previous summit to a similar question. Amar Rav Ashi says shtei takanos havoy. There are actually two separate takanos, two separate ordinances of the court as follows: doraisa bo mo'alin ba'afra ein mo'alin. On a doraisa level, really, again, there's me'ila by the paraduma, but not by the ashes of the paraduma. But kevan dechazu to come mezalzel liba. But then when they saw that people were being mezalzel in the ashes of the paraduma, v'ka'avdi minei lamakas, and they would just use those ashes for their wounds, to heal their wounds. They were acting with it in an inappropriate manner. So then gazru be me'ila. So then they made a decree that there is me'ila with the ashes of the paraduma. But then kevan dechazu to kaparshi misafik hazos. Then when they saw that they would separate and they wouldn't use these ashes for situations of sprinklings that were in doubt, let's say it was unclear whether the purification process was needed in a particular case, they were scared to use it because of me'ila, so then ukmu doraisa, so then they went back, they reestablished it to the doraisa halacha, that again, ba'afra ein mo'alin, that with the ashes of the paraduma there is no me'ila. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught in a brisa, par helam davar shal tzibur, with regards to the bull for a communal sin that's based on an erroneous ruling. Usire avodas kochavim, also the higot of avodah zarah, also that's a sin of avodah zarah based on an erroneous ruling. So we have the following machlokas tanoim. B'tchila magvin lohen divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds that b'tchila magvin lohen, which means that we make a separate collection of money to bring those karbanos. We don't bring it from the general communal fund of the trumas halishka. Again, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says mitrumas halishka hein boin, that they do come from the trumas halishka. They come from the general funds of the Beis HaMikdash for public karbanos. The Gemara continues and asks, Vatanya Ipcha, but didn't we have a brisa that teaches the exact opposite, that it's not Rabbi Shimon who says mitrumas halishka, it's actually Rabbi Yehuda who says mitrumas halishka. And the Gemara asks, Hai minayu achri, so which one of the brisas is later, meaning which one, the one that's later, is considered to be the more authoritative? Rashi explains, Hai minayu achrisi, ezu namar ba'achrona, which brisa is stated later, shenismoch aleh, that's the one that we would rely upon. The shema hadar be'me'idach, maybe there was a retraction from the other one. And the reason why we're asking this is Mishum Dekaim Alon Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbi Shimon, halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha is that if there's a dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. So we want to know, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? Did Rabbi Yehuda say B'tchila Magvin Lohen, or was it Rabbi Yehuda who said Mitrumas Halishka Hein Boyin? And the Gemara continues, Amru Rabbanan Kame de Rav Ashi. The Rabbanan said before Rav Ashi, Leimo Kamaisa Achri. So we should say that the first version of the Brisa is actually more authoritative. That is the latter version of the Brisa, meaning Rabbi Shimon is the one who says Mitrumas Halishka, that they bring from the general communal funds. Deshaminon Leila Rabbi Shimon, because we already saw an opinion of Rabbi Shimon earlier, and this was with regards to a situation when the Kohen Gadol dies with Chavisin, the Chayish Lepshia, that he was concerned with Pshia, meaning he was concerned that the heir would be negligent, and therefore he said it should come mitrumas halishka from the communal funds, and so that's the same thing over here. Here as well, it should come from the communal funds, from the trumas halishka. The Gemara continues, Amar lu Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi said to them, he said to the Rabbanon, Afilu tema basrai sachri. So we could actually even say that it's the latter version that is the later one, meaning to say that's authoritative. It's not Rabbi Shimon who says mitrumas halishka, and there's a difference between the case of the chavisin of the Kohen Gadol when the Kohen Gadol dies, and this case over here of these communal karbanos, par helam davar shel tzibor and sirei avodas kochavim, because kika chayish Rabbi Shimon lipshia. When is Rabbi Shimon concerned about negligence? That's b'milsa delesbu kapara begava. That's in a situation where there is no atonement. By the chavisin of the Kohen Gadol, there's no atonement, so there's a concern. Rabbi Shimon says it should just come from the general communal funds. But b'milsa deislu kapara begava, but in something where there's an atonement involved, like over here, par helam davar shel tzibor, sirei avodas kochavim, are karbanos that bring atonement, so lo chayish Rabbi Shimon l'pshia. There, Rabbi Shimon is not concerned for negligence, and therefore it's quite possible Rabbi Shimon would not be the one to say mitrumas halishka. And Rashi explains, the lesbu kapar, if there's no atonement, minchas kohen, the mincha of the kohen, the chavisin, lesa liyorshim, kapar begava, there's no atonement for the heirs over there. So there's a reason to be concerned. Avol parhelam dover kapar letzibur. When it comes to parhelam dover, there it is a kapar, it's an atonement for the community, and that's why these two cases are different. And the Gemara continues and asks, "My havela." So, what is the conclusion? What does Rabbi Shimon say? Is he the one that says mitrumas halishka or not? Amarle Rabba Zuti leRavashi. Rabba Zuti said to Ravashi, "Tashma, come and hear a proof from the following brisa. The Tanya, we learned in a brisa as karbani lachmi lishai reach nichochi tishmeru lahakriv li b'moado." Again, the pasuk says this is talking about the carbon tamid, but we learn inclusions from this pasuk as follows: "L'rabos parhelam davar shel tzibur sirei avodas kochavim." This pasuk comes to include the parhelam davar shel Tzibor and Sirei Avodas Kochavim, exactly the cases we're talking about. Sheboin mitrumas halishka, that they do come from the trumas halishka. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, these are the words of Rabbi Shimon, and so therefore this first version of the brisa that Rabbi Shimon says mitrumas halishka, again that is the authoritative version. And Rashi explains karboni lachmi liishai riba hakasav karbonos harbi. These words are inclusions in the pasuk to include other karbonos as well. Techol hani lashon karbon, into all of these different words are languages of a carbon. L'rabos parhelim, and that comes to include other karbonos, these other karbonos, like the parhelim davar shel tzibor, the sirei avodas kochavim, that they also come from the trumas halishka. The boin mitrumas halishka kitamid, they come from the trumas halishka, just like the carbon tamid. The vitamid mishtoi, because that's what the pasuk is actually talking about, is the tamid. V'afagav delav adaita dehachi heviu shekleim. Now, even though when those donated shkalim were brought, it wasn't having in mind these karbonos. Sharei lo hayu yodim sheyechta, they didn't know that there would be such a sin. Afilu hachim marbelu hukra. Nevertheless, the pasuk is including it. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, these are the words of Rabbi Shimon. Now, how do we know this is authoritative? This is also just a brisa. So Rashi says, "V'kevon to mikra yolef." Since this brisa is even bringing a pasuk, it's learning it out from a pasuk. Ikerhu, that shows that it is in fact an authoritative brisa, and we follow this brisa. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Ushleimo haisa kreva," in a situation where there's no kohen gadol, the kohen gadol dies. So then the chavisin is offered shleima, meaning usually it's offered as a chatzi isaron. The kohen gadol brings a half isaron in the morning, half isaron in the evening. But if the kohen gadol dies, then it's brought as a fully saron. And the Gemara says, Amar Reb Chia bar Abba. Reb Chia bar Abba says, "Boy Reb Yochanan." Reb Yochanan asked on this line in the Mishnah, what exactly does it mean? Does it mean shleima shachris or shleima ben harboim? Does it mean that a holy saron is brought in the morning and a holy saron is brought in the evening, in the afternoon? O Dilmor, maybe shleima shachris, maybe the whole thing is brought in the morning, uvetela ben harboim, and then nothing is brought in the evening in a situation where there's no kohen gadol. What exactly does the line in the Mishnah mean? And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava. Rava says, Tashma, come and hear a proof. And this is from a Mishnah in Meseches. Tamid Shemini B'chavisim, the eighth Kohen. It's talking about all of the different Kohanim who did portions of the service each day in the Beis HaMikdash. So the eighth Kohen, he was the one that conveyed the Chavisim. He's the one that brought the Chavisim to the Mizbeach. Now, V'im Isa, now if it is true, D'vitela Ben Harboyim, that in the evening sometimes they wouldn't have Chavisim at all. So Hazimnan D'lo Mishkach Leishmini B'chavisim. So sometimes it wouldn't happen that the eighth one would be conveying the chavisim. Hechidami, and what would be that scenario? Demeis kohen gadol v'lo minu acher tachtav. Let's say you have a situation where the kohen gadol died and no one was appointed. In other words, the general implication from this Mishnah in Talmud is that the chavisim always happened, and it always happened bein harbaim as well. And so therefore it seems that when the kohen gadol died, they would in fact bring the entire isaron in the morning and the entire isaron in the evening. And the Gemara continues, Amru Rabbanan Kami de Rabbi Yirmiyah. The Rabbanan said this in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Amar, and he said, when he heard this proof, he said, Bavloi tipshoi, the foolish Babylonians, Mishum de Yasvu Ba'asr de Chashocha, because they sit in a land that's dark, Amri Shmaitza de Mechashchan, they say, a dark teaching, they're not learning this properly, because in this Mishnah in Meseches Tamid, Ela de Katani, let's say for example, when it says in this Mishnah, Shvi Besoles, that the seventh one takes care of the soles, the fine flour, and Tashi B'yayin, and the ninth one takes care of the wine. This is all part of the carbon tamid, the accompanying mincha and the accompanying libations. So hachanami delo batli, do you think there also that there's never a situation where that's nullified, where that doesn't happen? Sometimes there are situations where it doesn't happen. For example, we learn minchasam v'niskeim b'layla, minchasam v'niskeim afilu l'machar. The mincha and the nesachim can sometimes be brought at night. Sometimes they'll be brought even the next day. And so therefore there are times where it's not brought together with the carbon. And so therefore obviously the Mishnah just means in general. Elo di'i lo katani. Rather, the way to understand the Mishnah is that di'i, meaning situations of if strange things happen, strange occurrences, that's not being accounted for in this Mishnah. So hachanami, so here also by Shmini bechavisim, di'i lo katani. Di'i is not something that the Mishnah is talking about. You cannot bring a proof from this Mishnah in Meseches Talmud. And the Gemara continues, Adrua kame de Rava, so they returned this to Rava. This response was given back to Rava that you can't bring a proof from this Mishnah. Amar, and then he said, Mi bishusin amri kamayu, mi tivusin lo amri kamayu. The reason they're so critical of the teachings of the Babylonians is because all of the bad teachings are said in front of them, but all of the good teachings are not said in front of them, and so therefore you shouldn't draw a conclusion just from one bad proof that's brought from a Mishnah. However, v'hadar amar Rava, but then Rava said, Hani na'ami tivusin, this actually is good, what we're saying is proper, meaning to say, even though this proof from the Mishnah may not be a great proof from the Mishnah, but nevertheless, it is true that the holy saron is brought in the morning and in the evening because of the following, because Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Soles mincha tamid, it says, Soles mincha tamid, by the chavisin, that's the words in the pasuk by the chavisin, but we learn from there, Harei loch minchas tamidin, it's like the minchas tamidin, meaning to say it always is brought in the morning and the evening. And Rashi explains, Shmini b'chavisin, the eighth Kohen, he conveys the chavisin up the ramp of the Mizbeach to the Mizbeach, b'Meseches Tamid, Moni l'Kohanim, Yud Gimel Ho'asukim b'Tamid. This is in Meseches Tamid, and the Mishnah over there is counting the 13 Kohanim who deal with the Karban Tamid, Bein Baboker, Bein Ba'erev, whether in the morning or the evening, Zebekach, V'Zebekach, this one does this one does that. And the response was, Bi'asra d'Chashoch, in a land that is dark, de Bavel Amukahi, Bavel was a low area, d'Chsev Omer L'Tzula Charvi, and so therefore it's a low area that's considered a dark area. The Mishnah then also says in Tamid, Shvi Makrif HaSolas, that the seventh Kohen brings the flour, the Minchas Nischei Tamid, of the Mincha of the Tamid, Teshi B'Yayin, the ninth one, the wine, Hachanami Delo Batli Liolim, do you think those also, they always happen, they're never nullified? V'Akaimelon Minchasav and Eskeim B'Laila, but we know sometimes the Minchas at night, sometimes Minchasav and Eskeim the next day. D'Lo Hekrivu Hayom Nesachim, if they don't bring the libations today, Yakrivim L'Machar, they bring it tomorrow. Uchagon, for example, Shalo Kidshu B'Kli, let's say they weren't sanctified in a vessel yet. D'Lo Nifsel B'Lina, then there's no psul, there's no disqualification of being left overnight, so it could be brought the next day. Alma Zimnin Dekarav Tamid below Nesachim. The point is, we see sometimes the Tamid is brought without the Nesachim. Elo Di'i lo have Nesachim lo katani. If there's a scenario with no Nesachim, that's not being accounted for in this Mishnah. Hachanami Gavi Chavisin, the same thing by Chavisin. Di'i Meis Kohen Gadol lo katani. We're not talking about a situation of a rare occurrence where the Kohen Gadol dies. Uliolam in Meis Betela, called Ben Harboim, Achayamud Kohen Acher, and maybe really it's true. If he would die, there would be no Bein Harboim Chavisin until there would be a new Kohen Gadol. Adru Lakame de Rava Hadakama Rabbi Yirmi Bavloi Tifshoy. They told Rava what Rabbi Yirmi said, that the Babylonians are foolish. And so he responded, Mi Bishusin Amri Kamayu Kashanu Omrim Shum Tam Sheino Yafa. When we say anything that's not a good point, Omrim Oso Hashomin Lefnei Bnei Eretz Yisrael, that they tell to those who are in Eretz Yisrael. But Mitivusin Kamrin and Mili Mal Yosef, when we say something good, Lo Amri Lo Kamayu, they don't tell that to those in Eretz Yisrael. But then he said, Hanami Da Amrin Deina B'Teila Mitivusini. The idea that we're saying that the Bein Harbaim Chavisin is not batal actually is good. The Yafa Marti, I did say properly. The Nafkali Mikra, because we can learn it out from a pasuk. The Chsib B'Chavisin Solas Min Chatamid. It says Solas Min Chatamid Ma'tamid Eino Batal Afiyana B'Teila. We learn from the Tamid, just like the Tamid is never batal, so too this is never batal. And the Gemara continues, My Havelah. So what is the conclusion? Rashi explains, My Havelah Karava Okar Rabbi Yirmiyah is like Rava, meaning like Rava that it's brought both in the morning and the evening when there's no Kohen Gadol, or like Rav Yirmiyah, that it's only brought in the morning, again, the entire Isaron. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak says, Tashma, come in here, a proof. The Tanya, as we learned in the following Brisa, Shleima Shacharis, Shleima Ben Harboim, that it's brought whole in the morning and it's brought whole in the afternoon, and that shows, like Rav again, that it is brought morning and afternoon, even when there is no Kohen Gadol. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yochanan says, Pligi ba Abba Yossi ben Dustai v'Rabbanan, there's a machlokas Abba Yossi ben Dustai and the Rabbanan as follows. Abba Yossi ben Dustai, Omer Abba Yossi ben Dustai says, Ma'afresh lo shnei kemotzim shel levona. When it comes to the chavisin, again, when a Kohen Gadol is bringing the chavisin, he brings half of it, half isaron in the morning and half isaron in the evening. So he has two levonas, two kemotzim, two fistfuls of levona, and he's going to use kometz shacharis v'kometz ben rabbaim. He divides that as well. One kometz is in the morning and one kometz is in the evening. V'Rabbanan Amri, and the Rabbanan say, no, no, mafresh lo kometz echad. He actually separates one kometz, because it's one kometz per isaron, and chatzi kometz shacharis v'chatzi kometz ben arbayim. A half a kometz is used in the morning of the levon of the frankincense, and a half a kometz is used in the evening, because again, it's a half isaron, so it's a half a kometz according to the Rabbanan. Rashi explains, pligi ba bechavise kohen gadol shalom meis. So you have a chavise kohen gadol that didn't die. There is a kohen gadol, so there's a machlokas. Ma'afresh lo shnei kamotzim shalavona kashoya mevi isaron shalim ibeis. So again, he brings a full isaron from his house. Mevi imo shnei kamotzim lavona, and he brings 2 fistfuls of lavona. Umakrev va'echad l'chatzi isaron shal shachris. He brings one of the kometzes is for the half isaron of the morning. Va'echad l'chatzi shal bein harbayim, and then the other one is for the half of bein harbayim. So again, essentially, the machlokas between Abba Yossi ben Dustoi and the Rabbanan is, according to Abba Yossi ben Dustoi, it's a kometz in the morning and a kometz in the evening, even though it's a half isaron in the morning and a half isaron in the evening. But the Rabbanan say no, it's the same idea. Just like there's a half isaron in the morning, half isaron in the evening, so too it's a half a kometz in the morning and a half a kometz in the evening. And the Gemara continues, what exactly is the root of the machlokas? Abba Yossi ben Dustoi savar, Abba Yossi ben Dustoi holds, lo eshkechon chatzi kometz to carve. We just don't find such a thing as a half a kometz that's ever offered. And so therefore it has to be that it's a kometz of levona in the morning and a kometz of levona in the evening. For Rabbanan savar, but the Rabbanan say, lo eshkechon isaron, the boy shnei kamotzim, the entire thing is one isaron. You don't find one isaron with 2 kamotzim. It's generally going to be one isaron with 1 kometz. So you split that 1 kometz according to the Rabbanan. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan then asked, Kohen Gadol Shemes, let's say you have a situation, going back to our case earlier of a Kohen Gadol who dies by the Chavisin, Velo Mino Acher Tachtav, and there's no Kohen Gadol appointed instead, and so now you have a situation where, as we said, you're going to bring an entire Isaron, you're not going to bring a half Isaron, but you're going to bring an entire Isaron, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Beis Amid Beis.